Alright guys, so let's continue on with the modifications to the fuel system on my EVO 10. I've got here the next stage of what we need to modify, and that's the fuel pump. So I've got a Walbro 450 liter per hour fuel pump with the map install adapter kit, which includes these bag of pieces. I've also got the filter sock and a feed line, although we're not going to use this feed line, we're going to use the plastic one. But we will use this connector in here and probably some of the clamps. We've got lastly the Dishworks fuel pump hardwire rewire kit. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to bypass the factory fuel pump wiring. We're going to use it to flip this solenoid and have a direct connection to the battery. So normally on an EVO 10 the fuel pump runs on 2 different voltages, and if you've been working on EVO 10s for a while and you read the forums, you know that there's a relay in the driver's compartment that tends to go bad that controls whether you're getting, I think, 9 volts or the full battery voltage. And what happens is you start to run lean. So a lot of people, when they do these bigger pumps, because they require thicker gauge wiring anyways, they go ahead and do a hardwire kit, which means the pump will always be running straight from the battery voltage, so you'll get full flow. If you don't do that, you actually don't get the full flow these are rated for typically. So anyways, let's go ahead and install this. It's really not that hard to get to the pump. The first thing we're going to do is go in the back seat and pull up the bottom cushion. So this is actually really easy. Literally just go in here. Oh man, it's really dark on the GoPros from what I can tell. You basically reach under the cushion and just yank up real hard. You see it pops out. There's 2 clips, one on each side. Alright, we'll get this side. Alright, you just wiggle this out a little bit, pull the seat belts backwards, and we've got access to the fuel pump now. So I'm going to pull this cushion completely out and put it to the side so it's not in my way. Alright, so now we're in the back. We've got the seat out of the way. We've got this access cover to the fuel pump. This is literally just adhesive down, so we're just going to pry up on it. I like to pick up right here. You slowly pull it up. It might be a little bit hard the first time you do it. I've done this more than once, so you can see mine's not that hard to pull off. Now all this adhesive, you probably want to try and keep it. You can kind of reuse it. It's a little tacky. See, we have full access to the fuel pump. So keep in mind, I've already let the fuel pressure out from previously when I put the injectors in. I haven't reconnected the fuel pump, so there should be no pressure in the lines. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. And then I'm going to get, I think it's an 8mm ratchet, a couple wrenches, start pulling all these connectors and hoses off. Alright, let's start by removing the electrical connectors. I would bring a couple tools with you, probably a flathead. Actually, you don't need it for that. You just pinch on this top clip and pull up. Move that out of the way. For this tiny connector here, there's a little metal clip on top. You just want to pull this up so that you can slide this off. You might want to, don't lose that. Should be able to slide it off. Got that out of the way. I believe if you pry these apart you can just pull up on this sensor, but you're going to smell fuel, so you might want to keep it in for a little bit just so you don't stink up your car too much. Now what I forgot to mention is that I've actually driven the car enough to lower the tank down to less than a quarter. I probably have about 1/8 of a tank in here. That way when we take the pump out, we won't have too much fuel to deal with. Let's go ahead and get this return line hose off. Again, we don't want to lose the clamp like I tend to do. There we go. I'm going to have a little bit of fuel coming out of there. And then the fuel feed, we need to basically get this green clamp halfway up, just like we did with the red one at the front, and pull out. It's always good to have some rags. What's probably happening here is not so much the fuel pressure as the just fuel in the line still behind the coming down the line. So we got a little bit of fuel squirt, not bad. Like I said, make sure you have a rag. Let's go ahead and clean this out of fuel before we move any further. Let's go ahead and start loosening the bolts. Take that rag out of here. There's Alright, managed to knock the GoPro down with the vibration from the power tools. Anyways, this last one back here is a little tricky. I'm going to have to use the old open-end wrench to get it off. Or maybe a small driver with a 1/4 inch socket driver ratchet. Let's go grab that. Once you got it loose, you can pretty much take it off by hand. Which is probably a better idea because you might get your tool stuck in there as you get the nut higher out in the stud. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and pull this ring off. Let's go ahead and pop this sensor out. Alright, so we've got the ring off. We put that outside and to the side. Move our tools out to the side. Let's go ahead and lift up on this. Carefully pull it out. Alright, you see we pulled it out carefully. We've got the float here. You'll notice there is a line below the float. That goes to the other side of the tank and basically helps feed the fuel across. There's a siphon. And carefully take that clip, pull it off, put it in the tank. Now we got our fuel pump out. Let's go ahead and carefully remove it from the vehicle. Alright, so I spent a little bit of time wiping this down and making sure as much fuel as possible is out. I also let it sit for a couple minutes to get as much fuel out as I could. And I think we're going to start disassembling now. First thing I'm going to do is carefully pull off some of this wiring. So it looks like there's two connectors here. There's the fuel sender unit and whatever this sensor is. We're going to carefully pull those two out. I can figure this part out. Don't want to break these because I'd like to know how much fuel I have still. Well, anyways, let's just move it out of the way for now. We'll just be very careful with it. Let's put this back in. We pull the fuel connector for the actual fuel pump out. And then it appears that to separate the top from the bottom, you basically have a couple E-clips in here which we're going to pull out. So we compress a little bit. Just get some needle nose, pull out. That's one side. Again, be careful with the float. Actually, there's only one E-clip on one side. Okay. So we're just going to carefully disassemble this thing. Alright. Take this spring, put it off to the side. So this tube right here on this side is the one the fuel pump's feeding. It's going all the way down and inside. to pull the fuel pump out, we want to go ahead and grab a screwdriver, carefully lift up on the 3 tabs, or 2 tabs. Nope, there's one more right here that we need to pull from below. Alright, so we pulled it right there. There's a little you pull out, and then you pull off on the 2 sides. Now we're going to move this out of the way. Should be able to carefully pull the fuel pump with the sock out. Alright, so now we got the fuel pump in its little housing out. There's some fuel in here actually, I could tell already, so let's go ahead and carefully figure out how to disconnect this bad boy. Oh, you know what? We're actually replacing this, so let's just go get some cutters and cut it off. And carefully cut through here. Alright. We're going to take this, we're going to go put it outside, let some of the gasoline evaporate off of it while we work on the pump housing. See, we're leaking fuel out of this thing. We basically want to pull this ring off. We're going to keep that. The rest of this we're not going to reuse. Let's go set this in the drip pan. So when you get the map kit, one of the things you get that goes with it is this adapter. The adapter basically goes back in the plastic ring and holds your fuel pump. So we got our new Walbro 450 liter per hour. We've got the install kit, so let's go ahead and take those parts out. So first thing first, let's go ahead and stick this through here. We are going to have to put the fuel sock back on, so before we clock the Walbro in here, I kind of want to see which way the fuel sock points. So it goes on like that, so the fuel sock kind of points this way, so we're going to point it that way. That'll tell us how to orient the bottom of the pump. Right, so you get some hardware in here. Let's go ahead, we got the pump in. Go ahead and stick this in. Now you'll notice that these 2 holes line up right there, and I believe what we want to do is go ahead and put these set screws through. So I guess with the MAP Performance Kit you get a 3/32 Allen screw. Go ahead and put the pump down. We've got the 2 Allen screws started. Go ahead and clock it like so. We'll go ahead and tighten this down. Okay, so now we got our pump situated. We got 2 washers and a nut for both of these fasteners. We're going to go ahead and put these down. So we'll tighten these down and then we'll insert this in our pump assembly, and we'll go ahead and reconnect with the new hose and clamps. Alright, let's go ahead and set this to the side. We've got this ready to go in just about, but before we can do so we got to do a couple more small changes to the pump housing. Now one of these is a pretty significant mod because of the pump we're using. There's a return siphon right here. You can see this is hooked up to the return. How this works is that the siphon, when you return fuel, pulls fuel through suction through this port from the other side of the tank to bring fuel from the passenger side over to the driver's side where the pump is. Unfortunately there's a restrictor in here, and because of that, if you run a high pressure fuel pump or a much higher flow rate fuel pump, it tends to pressurize the stock fuel system well higher than it should be, and it can actually blow this line off and cause a major leak. So what most people do is they modify this by drilling it out to a slightly bigger size. So we're going to go ahead and remove that and modify it. We'll start by first taking this blue connector off down here so that we can carefully remove the whole unit. Actually, the whole thing come right out? Yeah, it does, okay. Yeah, you just pull up carefully. There's an O-ring down there. I want to make sure we don't lose that. That's where the siphon comes in. Now we can pull this apart. So we just pull that tab there and that tab and pull out another O-ring. We don't want to lose that. I really don't want to cut this, but it's looking like I'm gonna have to. Carefully figure out where the thing ends. Here we go. I think that's what we're gonna have to do. We're gonna have to stick this back on there, what's left of it, but we're gonna carefully cut this off. Now, if you can see in there, there's a little restrictor and filter. We're gonna make sure that thing is clean and get it removed. So let's see if we can start a slit in that. Carefully cut this free. There we go. Start the cut. There we go. Okay. So I think we left enough on there that we can probably get this back on. Yeah. We can probably get it back on and clamp it on. But inside of there, there's a little filter. Should make sure this is clean. It looks like it's alright. You know, I jumped to a different step real quick, and that's to put the pump on with this fuel tubing. This was a bitch to get on. I'm not gonna lie. I used my heat gun a little bit to kind of warm it up, get it a little bit pliable so that I could squeeze it over there, and I got it as far down as I can past the barb, put the clamp on it. Top section's not so bad. It's just that particular pump. So I'm just putting the hose clamps on now. Don't want to tighten these more than necessary because you don't want to snap the fittings. Just get them snug. They should stay in place. Alright, so pump connected. We are going to have to modify this. We need to drill a hole in the top so that we can get this pass-through fitting in for the wiring. Go ahead and snap these ribs off. Probably pretty close. Perfect. Let's see, we've got it through there. Looks like we might have to break off a little more of the rib over towards this side since I didn't drill it perfectly straight. I know that's not perfect, but that'll seal. Other guys do this with JB Weld, so still not that bad. Alright, so I took a little bit of a break. Obviously it's not going to show up on the video because I wouldn't record me doing nothing. But I went and did some research and I finally figured out what I'm supposed to be doing. I thought I knew when I opened this thing up. I thought it'd be pretty obvious how to modify this. But for whatever reason, I was just worried that I was going to screw it up because you can only do this once. So let's talk about what we are going to do, what the modification does look like. So here's the bottom of the fuel pump unit, you could say. Remember, just a moment ago I had disassembled this. This piece was down there, and this was roughly here. Right. So this is the siphon from the other side of the tank, and we basically removed this, we pulled it up, and we got these two pieces out. Right. The part we're going to actually modify is this bottom piece right here. So the orifice that we're going to modify is down there. So basically fuel goes down through the return this way, and this is going down the Venturi effect and sucks fuel out up through this one. This one goes down into that O-ring there, which is connected to that spout on the side, which pulls from the other side of the tank. So this is the unit we actually want to modify. You can modify this. You can open this up a little bit more going through there. You just have to be careful because it's not straight, so you can't just drill straight through. We're going to do a 3/32, which is 0.93 inch drill bit. That should be enough to start with. You don't want to go too big because the Venturi effect won't work anymore. And if that happens, basically that last quarter of a tank that's stuck on the other side of the fuel tank won't get siphoned over. So let's go ahead and grab a drill and carefully modify this thing. Take this big old step drill out. Get this bit in here. Alright, so we're going to carefully put this down in there and drill through. There we go. Now you can see, I can get this on the camera, the hole's a lot bigger. You can actually see the blue towel below through it. It's not that big though. I mean, 3/32 is hardly anything. I'm going to go ahead and clean this out a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and drill this passageway a tiny bit bigger too. Not much though. We don't want to unseat the valve. Alright, we're going to clean that out real good, and probably with some Q-tips or something, get all the plastic out and blow it out with some air, then put it back together. Alright, let's go ahead and put this back together. The first thing we'll do is go ahead and carefully snap this into here and seat the O-ring. Alright, so we've got this piece ready to go. Now we're going to carefully insert it into here. You know what? I think we're going to pull this O-ring out and put it on here first. See if that makes it easier to put back together. Make sure everything's lined up. There we go. That snapped in all the way. We bring this around the fuel float and snap it back onto here. Now we've got to put together the rest of the pump. Now I skipped a couple steps before. You probably saw that I went ahead and hooked up this hose between the pump and the top of the fuel pressure pump housing. We've still got this hose we have to put back on. This is the return, and we need to make this connector go through. But before I connect that, let's go ahead and put the sock on the fuel pump. You're going to need that sock on there. Make sure it's on all the way. Take this, drop it in, line up all the snaps. Alright. Now this part, we're going to have to probably get this hose to wrap around a little bit. So the hose is going to wrap like so. That's how we're going to wrap the hose around. We need to put the spring back in the pocket. Put that on there. Push this down a little bit so we can get the clip in. Just got to find my pliers so I can snap that sucker in. Stick it on carefully. That's where you got to be careful not to shoot parts across the garage. Alright, so now we've got the pump situated in there. We've got to put the fuel return back on. We're probably going to have to clamp this on somehow. We've got to put the filter back in too. Just so happens we have a spare clamp. Put that on the fuel return. Go ahead and plug the fuel pump in to its connector. Kind of tuck that out of the way. I'm going to plug in the fuel sending unit to its connector. And go ahead and throw this bad boy back in the top for now. And then we need to get this black fuel return hose over that, which I'm going to heat it up a little bit, stick it on there, and put this clamp around. Alright, after a little bit of struggle, we got this thing back together. These plastic hoses are kind of a pain in the butt, but I got this one clamped onto the fuel return. I got the fuel feed ready to go. Get the pump housed and connected in. We've reconnected the fuel float, so that should all work properly. And let's go ahead and go throw this back in the car, which is the reverse of what I showed at the beginning of the video. Probably the easiest part so far. Alright, so I'm going to close the video out right now. I didn't show putting the pump back in. If you watched the whole video so far, you've seen me pull it out, so it's pretty much just the reverse. The next step is actually doing the hardware kit. I'm going to save that for the next video, so tune back in. Thanks for watching.